After this week, the remaining lessons will be more on the practical application of the skills and techniques to evaluate your progress using an assessment tool. Today, I will discuss 2 more skills and then proceed to the 4 major counseling techniques. Number 4, trustworthiness. A counselee must feel like he can trust his counselor. There is a need to trust that the counselor will maintain confidentiality, respect their experiences, and withhold judgment. By building trust, the counselor helps the counselee feel at ease as they share personal and difficult feelings and information. The counselee should never feel like being judged for thoughts or behavior that don't align with the counselor's sense of ethics, morals, religion, or etiquette. Some counselees might rely on humor as a coping mechanism, so being able to relate to them on a more personal level can also help establish trust. I want you to close your eyes and think about a time in your life when you were very unhappy. In your mind, choose someone with whom you could confide, with whom you could share your pain. What qualities would you want from that person? Most likely, you will choose someone who could accept your feelings, not try to give you advice, whom you can trust, whom would not interrupt you, who would hold you emotionally and make you feel safe, even if he could do nothing to change your difficult circumstances. A counseling relationship is built on trust. What is disclosed is kept confidential and must not be passed on to others. Now, this time, think of a secret that you have. Nobody knows about this thing. Think about sharing this information with your trusted counselor. How would you feel if he told someone else? Some of the emotions that you may feel are betrayal, anger, hurt, feeling shut down. Keeping information confidential is giving your trust to someone and keeping your word. As a counselor, you are in a privileged position to be trusted with your counselee's important information. Let's move on to number 5 skills. Okay. 5th, empathy. In addition to what we have previously learned, the term empathy and sympathy are both about feeling for somebody else's situation, but they often get confused. Empathy is putting yourself in another's shoes and trying to see the world through their eyes. This does not mean that you feel exactly what they feel or that you have been through everything they have been through. Sympathy is feeling what another person is going through. For instance, feeling the sadness of a person from a loss. Think about your favorite pair of shoes. Where have those shoes been with you? How far have you walked with them? Have they been in the mud or rain? Have they been dancing? Think about your best friend. What size are his or her feet? Would he or she be able to wear your shoes? Do you know if your feet would fit in her or his shoes? Do you know where his or her shoes have been? How far has his or her journey shaped his or her shoes? Empathic or active listening happens when you listen for meaning. When you listen with your body, you lean forward. When you listen with your heart, you feel the counselor's pain. Listen with your ears, you should show interest. Listen with your eyes, you watch and observe body language. Listen with your mouth when it is mostly closed. Remember, communication is 55% body language, 38% tone of voice, and 7% words. The counselee might not remember what was said, but he will remember how you made him feel. How do we show empathy? It's hard to empathize with those who are different from us. To show empathy, as counselors, we need to be open-minded. Counselors need to set aside, for the moment, their beliefs, values, and attitudes to consider those of the counselee. Imaginative. Counselors need to imagine the counselee's background, thoughts, and feelings. Committed. Counselors must have a desire or dedication to understand the counselee. Knowing and accepting yourself. Knowing yourself and accepting who you are helps to develop empathy for others. Counselors need to display empathy or the ability to look at the counselee's situation from their perspective to understand their experience. In essence, this means not only being in the shoes but also entering his world. You should also be genuine and authentic. Remember, the counselee must feel safe and nurtured. At the same time, healthy counselee-counselor relationships depend on the counselors being able to control their emotions, maintain professional boundaries, and prevent their own experiences or feelings from affecting how they treat counselees. Self-disclosure can be one way to express empathy, but be cautious and try to bring the conversation back to the counselee. For example, you could say something like, "It's very common for new parents to feel overwhelmed. I certainly did. Do you think you're being too hard on yourself?" Let's move on to the counseling techniques. Counseling techniques mean the application of basic competence and theories in the counseling process to establish and maintain the counseling relationship, diagnose the problem, formulate a preventative treatment or rehabilitative plan, and facilitate appropriate interventions. There are 4 counseling techniques. Number 1, reflecting technique. The reflecting technique acts as a mirror. It gives back to the counselee what he just communicated to the counselor. It lets the counselee know that the counselor understands about what the counselee just shared. The reflecting technique communicates empathy. Reflecting is an important technique in counseling useful for relationship building. Reflecting is valuable in building a relationship with the counselee by communicating trust, acceptance, and understanding. Clarification. Reflecting is helpful for the counselee to be able to clarify for himself his problems and feelings. Information. Reflecting helps the counselor get information about the counselee and how he views his situation. Verification. Reflecting helps the counselor to check his perception of what the counselee communicates. Here are 4 reflecting techniques that can be used at any stage in a counseling session but are important for building trust and exploring the problem. Number 1, reflecting feelings. Reflect on what the counselee is feeling. Focus on the feelings, not on the details of what is said. Number 2, restating or rephrasing. This is saying that the counselor understands what the counselee is communicating. By doing this, the counselor is letting the counselee know that he is understood, and if not, the counselor is willing to be corrected. Number 3, affirmation. This encourages the counselee in the choices he made. Affirmation can be for choices, knowledge, or behavior. Affirmation in counseling is encouraging the counselee to affirm himself. This is something the counselee can do for himself rather than depend on the counselor for it. Affirmation is an important technique for empowering counselees by affirming them. The counselor is encouraging them in a healthy decisions and behaviors they have chosen and helping them to continue making similar choices. Number 4, summarizing. Summarizing highlights the most important areas, feelings, or themes of what the counselee is communicated. Summarizing is useful for drawing together important points and making them clear. It is useful for reviewing the session and then briefly describing the most important points and telling what would be covered next time. Next, technique, confrontation. Confrontation is an open, honest identification of the counselee's self-defeating patterns or manipulations. The counselor shares how those inappropriate behaviors produce negative consequences in interpersonal relationships. It is a challenge for the counselee to integrate the conflicting aspects of his being. The goal of this technique is to affect personality and behavior changes, to help the counselee develop the moral attitude and strength to avoid the same or similar problems in the future, to cause to meet and bring face-to-face issues that need to be addressed. Remember, to confront in a spirit of love is a gentle and patient process that respects the counselee as an equal. When to confront? Confront when there are inconsistencies between words and actions. Confront when there are inconsistencies between plans and actions. Confront when there are inconsistencies between thoughts and feelings. Confront when the track record, history, is inconsistent with plans. Remember the diagram of the complete message in our past lesson? This is where that diagram is applicable to validate the result of your observation using the confrontation technique. Third technique, directive. In this counseling, the counselor plays an active role as it is regarded as a means of helping people to learn to solve their problems. This type of counseling is otherwise known as the counselor-centered counseling, because in this counseling, the counselor does everything himself. Example, analysis, synthesis, diagnosis, prognosis, prescription, and follow-up. Directive counseling has the following features. Number 1, during the interview, attention is focused on the particular problem and possibilities for its solutions. Number 2, during the interview, the counselor plays a more active role than the client or the counselee. Number 3, the counselee makes the decision, but the counselor does all that he can to get the counselee to decide keeping his diagnosis. Number 4, the counselor tries to direct the thinking of the counselee by informing, explaining, interpreting, and advising him. There are 5 steps that are usually followed in this type of counseling. Analysis. In this step, data is collected from a variety of sources for an adequate understanding of the counselee. Synthesis. This step implies organizing and summarizing the data to find out the asset, liability, adjustments and maladjustments of the counselee. Diagnosis: formulating conclusions regarding the nature and causes of the problem expressed by the counselee is the major concern of this step. Prognosis: this step implies predicting the future development of the problem of the counselee. Counseling: this step indicates taking step by the counselor with the counselee to bring about a life adjustment. Follow-up: this step implies helping and determining the effectiveness of the counseling provided to the counselee. The counselor plays a vital role in the directive counseling process. He is the pivot of the process and the leader of the situation. The counselor does most of the talking problems and the individual is not the focus. The counselor tries to direct the thinking of the counselee by informing, explaining, interpreting, and sometimes advising. The counselor collects all possible information about the counselees and analyzes them for an adequate understanding. He summarizes and organizes the data to understand the abilities and limitations, adjustment, and maladjustment of the counselee. He formulates conclusion about the nature and causes of his problems. He predicts the future development of his problems. He prescribes what the counselee should do to solve his problem and follows the consequences or effects of his prescription. Directive counseling is also called prescriptive counseling because the counselor prescribes the solution or the course of action for the counselee. Number 4, non-directive technique. In this type of counseling, the counselee, not the counselor, is the pivot or the center of the counseling process. He helps an active role, and this type of counseling is a growing process. In this counseling, the goal is the independence and integration of the counselee rather than the solution to the problem. In this counseling process, the counselee comes to the counselor with a problem. The counselor establishes rapport with the counselee based on mutual trust, acceptance, and understanding. The counselee provides all the information about his problems. The counselor assists him in analyzing and synthesizing, diagnosing his difficulties, predicting the future development of his problems, making a decision about the solution of his problems, and analyzing the strengths and consequences of his solutions before making a final decision. Since the counselee is given full freedom to talk about his problems and work out a solution, this technique is also called permissive counseling. When a counselee seeks the counselor's help, he soon discovers that the counselor accepts him as he is and believes in his ability to solve his problem in his own way. He also learns that he can talk about whatever he chooses, and sometimes he finds, even to his surprise, that he can talk about topics that so far he couldn't discuss with his closest friends, though previous experiences with counselors may have taught him that the counselor is a giver of advice. He now finds that he is talking with a person who tries to understand him, tries to follow what he is saying and feeling, trying to help him understand himself, and neither gives advice nor attempts to manipulate him into making a decision that the counselor believes is best for him. He feels that the counselor understands why he sees things differently at different times and he learns that if he wishes, he can terminate or avoid the relationship without solving the specific problem which is brought to the counselor. 9 steps are adopted in a non-directive counseling process. Number 1, a person comes for help as the counselee. Number 2, the counselor defines the situation by indicating that he doesn't have the answer, but he can provide a place and atmosphere in which the counselee can think of an answer or solutions to his problems. Number 3, the counselor is friendly and interested and encourages free expression of feelings regarding the problem of the counselee. Number 4, the counselor tries to understand the feelings of the counselee. Number 5, the counselor accepts and recognizes the positive as well as the negative feelings. Number 6, the period of release or free expression is followed by a gradual development of insight. Number 7, as the counselee recognizes and accepts emotionally as well as intellectually his real attitudes and desires, he perceives the decision and that he must take and the possible courses of action open to him. In conclusion, one of the biggest problems of people working in the helping or caring ministry is burnout. This can happen when the counselor gives too much of himself to the work but does not know how to take care of his own needs. If a counselor doesn't take care of himself, he can start to feel exhausted, lack motivation, loss of ministry satisfaction, resentment of the work you have to do and the people you work with, isolation from colleagues, and then he starts to feel sick. Look for signs of burnout, then act before it's too late. Counselors must recognize the stressful nature of the work. What are the particular stresses that they have to deal with? Counselors must try to take some time to think about their own needs, not just those of their counselees. Counselors must help develop systems of support, informal or formal, for themselves. They must speak to the leaders within their church or organization so that they can support and protect them. By now, we know and have experienced that counseling is a stressful and emotional job. Counselors need to debrief and share the load. They will not be able to help other people if they do not care for themselves. Counseling is a stressful job when you do it on your own. More than anything else, counseling is the work of the Holy Spirit. It is a spiritual activity that requires divine enablement and empowerment for us to accomplish. I am praying for all of you, and I'm praying for myself also, believing that God can use us to make a difference in the lives of hurting people. Have faith.